Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone. We're so glad you've joined us for this exciting webinar on food systems that nourish. Just some housekeeping before we begin. Throughout this webinar, if you have questions, you can use the Q&A function that's in the GoToWebinar platform. And we'll have some Q&A time with our panelists at the end of the panel portion. We also encourage you to tweet during this webinar. We're using the hashtag #BetterNutrition, so you can use that to contribute to the conversation online. Now, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was beginning to be widespread understanding that we must focus on food systems as a whole to end hunger and end malnutrition. For us, food systems encompass farmers, ranchers, fishers, processors, transporters, marketing agents, retail operations, restaurants, and consumers, and a complex dynamic web. And to get on a path to success, food systems need to make healthy diets available and affordable to all, ensure that food is produced sustainably, and support equitable livelihoods for all workers in food systems. And while food systems are multifaceted, intersecting with climate change, sustainability, livelihoods, and resilience, our event today is focused on nutrition within food systems. We believe that food systems must nourish on top of all else we expect from them in feeding people and supporting farmers and other workers' incomes. So today we're going to hear from global leaders in nutrition and food security about what needs to happen in order to transform food systems for better nutrition and about some upcoming opportunities to put this into action. Our first speaker today is Congressman Jim McGovern, who has represented the Massachusetts 2nd District since 1996. Mr. McGovern is on the House Rules Committee and a member of the House Committee on Agriculture Subcommittee on Nutrition and Oversight. He's also a co-chair of the House Hunger Caucus. He's been a champion on the Hill for global food security and nutrition, co-sponsoring the Global Food Security Act and its reauthorization, and is an original co-sponsor of the Global Nutrition Resolution, House Resolution 189. The Congressman is also on Bread for the World's Board of Directors. So, sir, I toss it over to you. Welcome. We're so glad that you are here to share with us.
Well, thank you, Jordan. And I want to thank Bread for the World for inviting me to say a few words at the start of this forum on food systems that nourish. You know, it's a little intimidating to speak before the experts make their presentations. It's also intimidating because so many of you in the audience have been in the field, on the ground, and on the front lines of this work for many, many years. And I believe we are at a pivotal point in time and history for so many critical issues, but especially for addressing hunger, nutrition, and global food security. And I think all of our experts today will agree that leadership is desperately needed. Global leadership for coordinated international action. And it's needed in each of our own countries and our own corners of the world. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the fragility of our national, regional, and global food systems. A preliminary July assessment by the FAO suggests that COVID-19 could add between 83 and 132 million people to the total number of undernourished in the world. Simply put, when local markets are disrupted, supply chains break down. If small farmers can't sell their products, they can't buy seeds and fertilizer, they can't plant, they can't harvest, and they can't get crops to market, creating a vicious and hard to break cycle. I really believe this is not a moment for Band-Aids. We need major transformational solutions. We all need to respond to the urgent immediate needs created by the pandemic, but we cannot afford to limit ourselves to just that. We must work to build a more stable and viable food system for the long haul. This means placing even greater value on small farmers, especially women, and demanding a renewed international commitment to creating a whole of society approach that confronts the devastating economic impact of coronavirus, worsening hunger due to conflict and war, and the impacts of climate change. These challenges are urgent and important, but they are not new and they're not unique. We have recognized the need for these changes for a long, long time. In fact, the priority placed on building resilient communities has helped save lives and kept many communities viable during the current pandemic crisis. That's the kind of visionary work we can build on. I'm proud that Congress and past U.S. administrations have worked in such a bipartisan way to create programs like Food for Peace, Feed the Future, and the McGovern-Dole International Food for Education and Child Nutrition Program. I'm proud that we have greatly expanded child nutrition programs, especially in the critical first 1,000 days, and reinforced local and regional markets worldwide. But we need to get a lot better at incorporating on the ground in our policymaking and holistic approach that we all talk about on paper. Over the weekend, there was an announcement that water is joining gold, oil, and other commodities traded on Wall Street. This is happening because of worries that this life-sustaining resource may become even more scarce across even more parts of the world. Starting this week, farmers, hedge funds, and municipalities will be able to hedge against or bet on potential water scarcity in California. Systems critical to providing food are already breaking down or broken. Food systems, fresh water, clean water, water for irrigation, public health, transportation systems, soil degradation, climate change, nutrition, access to food, access to affordable and nutritious food, indigenous knowledge, indigenous systems, warehousing, distribution, environmentally and nature-sensitive agriculture. These are big topics, each in its own right, but they're all part of the same set of challenges, and we can no longer afford to pursue them in isolation. We know that food security is a root cause of desperation, migration, and destabilization. We understand that we not only have a moral obligation to end hunger, but that compassion and cooperation are among the strongest weapons in our arsenal. We recognize that global poverty and food insecurity are not problems that time alone will solve. They require active and focused commitment. So I look forward to carrying out this work together. We can and we must generate the principled leadership and fresh thinking so vital to any international campaign that tackles these existential threats. The world literally hungers for it. And finally, let me just say something I always say, these are solvable problems. Hunger is a political condition, and we need to figure out how to generate the political will within each of our countries, within each of our corners of this globe, to make sure that the resources and the focus is there. This is solvable, and I'm hopeful that in the coming months and years that we will focus even more, we will focus more greatly on these issues. So I thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Congressman. Really excited to have you here, and thank you so much for your leadership on these issues.
Thank you.
Really excited now to move us into our panel. We have three esteemed experts with us. Ms. Esther Penunia is the Secretary General of the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development, an Asian alliance of national farmers organizations composed of small-scale women and family farmers, fishers, indigenous peoples, forest users, herders, and pastoralists. Our second expert is Ms. Gladys Mugambi. She is the Scaling Up Nutrition government focal point for Kenya and sits in the Kenyan Ministry of Health. She's also on the SUN Executive Committee. The SUN movement is led by governments committed to reducing malnutrition among their people and supported by local civil society, businesses, donor countries, and the United Nations. And there are now 62 countries in the lead of this movement. And finally, Mr. Amir Abdulla is the Deputy Executive Director of the UN World Food Program, which will receive the Nobel Peace Prize this week. Congratulations, sir. He's also the interim chair of UN Nutrition. UN Nutrition brings together UN agencies to accelerate progress for nutrition objectives and targets. So I will ask my panelists to join me by turning on their cameras, and we'll get started. Welcome. And Gladys is also joining us, but unfortunately we will not have her on video, but welcome, Gladys. So this first is for all of you. Really wanting to set the stage. What is at stake for people facing food insecurity and malnutrition right now? And why do food systems need to change? What is your vision for nutritious food systems as we move into 2021? So Esther, I'll call on you first for your remarks.
Thanks, Jordan, first of all, for inviting me to this panel, as well as for the opening question. And good evening po to Representative Jim McGovern and Ambassador Tom Kip, and to my fellow panelists. So let me give 3 points. First, Our food system needs to change because it is very much broken. Since the 1800s in America and in Asia Pacific in the 1960s, during the Green Revolution, we have embarked on an industrialized, chemical-intensive agriculture system and destructive and abusive exploitation of natural resources, whose main aim was to increase productivity to feed a growing world and raise incomes. Yet, while we have indeed produced faster than global population growth, still there is poverty, hunger, and more so biodiversity loss, soil and ecosystem degradation, air, water, sound pollution. Food processing are done at the cities or even abroad, and with the low income from tedious work of planting and harvesting, men, women, and youth are compelled to migrate to cities and abroad to find other jobs. This broken food system has been dramatically exposed during the COVID-19 pandemic in many developing countries, such as in the Philippines. In March to April, farmers were at the height of their harvest season, but because of the interrelated problems like poor roads, no cooling and storage facilities, no information on where the market is, the traders who used to buy from them cannot go to them to buy their products, farmers were not able to sell their products, and some of these products were left rotten in the fields, thus decreasing their incomes. And yet, food in the cities became scarcer and more expensive, but some of the traders who did come to buy their products bought from them at the same low price, but sold them in the cities at a much higher price. This is the food system that makes 690 million people globally go hungry, and every year there are millions more getting hungry. In 2019, globally, 144 million children under the age of 5 were stunted, 47 million wasted, but then 38 million overweight. So FAO 2019 report on biodiversity in food and agriculture states that many key components of biodiversity for food and agriculture at genetic, species, and ecosystem levels are in decline. If we don't have diverse food, that spells a lot of disaster in terms of nutrition. Overall, the diversity of crops present in farmers' fields has declined, and threats to crop diversity are increasing. And amongst the world's poorest are the farmers and the farm workers who produce the food. This is the food system that produces a lot of food wastage. In America, it says 50% of the food is wasted. Globally, 1/3 of all the food produced is wasted. So we need to shift to a food system that achieves multiple wins. And this is our vision of a food system. One that not only raises productivity and incomes, but also protects the environment, increases soil health, biodiversity, resiliency, and adaptation while mitigating climate change, strengthens health and immunity to diseases, provide access, make available and affordable healthy and nutritious food while reducing food waste and eliminating hunger and poverty. And a food system that links the rural and urban populations in a web of life that is interconnected and interdependent. And lastly, a food system that empowers farmers and consumers to act and make choices so that we are able to make this radical shift and transformation. It is a food system that is productive, prosperous, resilient, regenerative, healthy, and nutritious, and empowering to the most vulnerable, especially men, women, and young farmers. It is a food system that nourishes the planet as well as its people. Is this possible? We think yes, we can do the shift. First, adapt to agroecological, sustainable, integrated, biodiverse, organic systems in farms, fisheries, and forests. Build the agency of farmers and consumers so that they are organized and federated as cooperatives and social enterprises that enter into full value chain services and inter-cooperative trading and business arrangements, strengthening local food systems and revitalizing the rural economy, thus ensuring steady workforce for farming for food. And this agency of family farmers and consumers are recognized as important stakeholders and as such are represented in key consultative and decision-making bodies at government levels. Thank you, Jordan. Back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther. Gladys, I'm turning to you now. What is your answer to this, this broad question, of course. What's at stake and what needs to change for food systems for nutrition in Kenya?
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this discussion. And I want to first of all say that at this time when we have COVID, the people who are facing food insecurity and malnutrition are even at greater risk of death, because in Kenya we have areas where there is no food at all because of drought, and therefore people need to access this food from farmers who are far away from them. And there is this fear concerning COVID, and therefore traveling long distances is an issue. So there is need for us to start thinking differently on how we have to ensure that these people are reached. Now, as we know, COVID, the people who are undernourished are at more risk, and also those who are overnourished. And Kenya faces the double burden of malnutrition, and therefore we need to ensure that the systems that we put in place will not will make sure that we have food that is safe, accessible, and nutritious throughout the year. And if that has to happen, then we must ensure that our systems for transportation of food, the prices, and all those engaged in the food system are well informed concerning the nutrition and how food can affect the health of the people. And therefore, we have the vision of having a multi-sector approach to this issue, ensuring that all the actors are able to get the information correctly and establish systems whereby we are reaching the people that need us most. So that is our vision in Kenya, and we have a broad a policy that has the broad approach, but what we need is to ensure that we are able to implement, especially that now that we have the devolved government. So that is our vision, and the government has taken this as a serious matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. Really great to hear what Kenya is doing on this matter. Amir, what about the World Food Program? What is at stake, and what's the World Food Program's vision for food systems that nourish?
Well, thanks very much, Vanessa, and thank you to fellow panelists and of course Ambassador Kiptom and Representative McGovern. Well, I think both Esther and Gladys have outlined some key challenges, but really, when we look at this year's State of Food Insecurity report, and you see that at least 3 billion people couldn't afford a healthy diet, and that was pre-COVID, and that 1.5 billion wouldn't be able to afford a diet that would meet their nutritional needs. And we also know that hunger has been on the rise since 2014. So that was the backdrop. And then COVID-19 has increased the number of severely food insecure by some 130 million. And that, I mean, there we're talking severely food insecure, taking that number up to around close to 270 million. And furthermore, and Gladys had talked about the impact of COVID-19, but the impact or the decrease in improving stunting levels. Gladys had mentioned about the impact of stunting, but what COVID-19 has done has slowed down any chance that we had so far of meeting SDG targets and WHA targets. And COVID-19 has actually meant that cumulative gains that we've had in the past over many years, which were slow, but at least they were in the right direction, we're at risk of losing the gains we've made. So the UN call to action on nutrition has emphasized the need for collective and comprehensive action for nutrition across different systems and sectors, and emphasizing that nutrition is very much the business of food system actors. So one of the the systems that has to really respond, react, and change most are the food systems. From WFP perspective, we clearly operate within the food system space. We support the most vulnerable. We have the Sustainable Development Goals 2 on hunger and 17 on partnerships at the center of our work. And this makes us puts us in a unique position to support governments to work across sectors to identify the vulnerabilities to food insecurity and particularly malnutrition, but also the immediate and underlying causes, as well as potential future threats, helping communities, governments, nations prepare strategies and actions to mitigate the impact, but also build resilience and prevent future impact. Clearly, WFP have a very large program footprint. We work with partners to provide prevention and treatment centers for wasted children, malnourished, pregnant, breastfeeding women, collaborating with governments and other UN agencies. And our work with other UN agencies really comes together under the Global Action Plan on Wasting. And this includes working through health sectors also, reaching out to community structures, working with food systems, social protection systems, and often where these intersect, to increase coverage and efficiencies and reduce suffering in all forms of malnutrition, especially ones that are immediately life-threatening. And quite honestly, in this day and age, having malnutrition become a threat like that is, in a sense, almost an insult to development and future health and productivity. The impact is untenable, but as Representative McGovern had just said, this is a solvable problem. And that is the real insult. That this can be solved means that we all have to work together to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Esther, I want to come back to you. Farmers really are the backbone of our food systems. I think we've heard how food systems are quite vast, but really farmers are the ones producing the foods. So what support or policies do farmers need to make this vision of nutritious food systems a reality? Esther, we can't hear you.
I'm muted. Yeah, thank you for your question, Jordan. And indeed, farmers are the backbone of our food system. 90% of all farms worldwide are worked on by family farmers. Around 70% of them are small-scale farmers. In Asia Pacific, that means an average of 2 hectares or less farm size. Very small compared to American farmlands. And these family farmers produce 80% of the world's food in value terms. So in terms of support, we have conducted several webinars, most recent last October and November, on the UN Decade on Family Farming and Sustaining Family Farming, and we have identified these policy priorities. Now, in terms of production, we need secured rights over our farms, fisheries, and forests, as well as seeds, because these are the most vital natural resources for agriculture. In many developing countries, at least a third of the farmers do not even own the lands they till. And then policies that incentivize family farmers to shift to sustainable agroecological approaches, reforestation and land restoration, promotion of community-based seed systems, inclusion of agroecology in agriculture universities so that there will be massive extension work, also like training of farmer master trainers, especially on the production, the propagation of the nutritious foods and nutrition sensitive agriculture, like the forgotten and neglected underutilized crops. In terms of processing, marketing, and distribution, policies to incentivize farmers to organize into cooperatives, providing full value chain services to their members. So this will include incentives such as tax exemptions, flexible and easy credit to cooperatives, public procurement, of crop and food produced by cooperatives, especially healthy and nutritious food for school children, for example, for their feeding programs. Okay. In terms of agency, policies to support women and young farmers, like Magna Carta for women farmers and young farmers, reducing drudgery and easing women's work, provision of public goods that concern women, such as daycare centers, clinics, hospitals, potable water facilities for sanitation and hygiene, electricity and fuel, and nutrition, like promotion of homestead or kitchen gardens, formation of women's groups for enhancing skills on nutrition-sensitive agriculture, processing and food preparation, even of forgotten and neglected crops. When it comes to nutrition, women farmer will be the backbone for nutrition-sensitive agriculture. For the youth, provide special and integrated agriculture programs and support services to young farmers. And lastly, for our development partners and donors, we urge you to invest in global, regional, and national programs that aim to promote sustainable, climate-resilient family farming agriculture with the agency of family farmers through their associations, networks, and cooperatives. AFA is a partner of IFAD in the work of building capacities of farmers' organizations to deliver economic services to our members and engage in policy work with our governments through the Asia Pacific Farmers Program. We are also implementing a project with IFAD that is helping us respond in the short term the challenges that our members are facing during these COVID times. Also, we represent the Asia CSOs in the steering committee of the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, or GAPSP, where the US has had a very significant role in its establishment in 2010. And US saw GAPSP as an important part of the Feed the Future initiative. And the US continues to be the largest donor to the program today. About 1/3 of total funds has been contributed by US to date. Currently, GAPSP has provided $60 million in 16 ongoing government and PO-led projects to assist in COVID-19 related efforts to address hunger, malnutrition, and livelihoods disruption. And GAPSP is poised to do more and will launch a new call for proposals in spring 2021 and would welcome the US making a new contribution to GAPSP to enable this call for proposals to have a wider reach. So this is a whole gamut of policies and incentives at national, regional, and global levels that we think should be done to really make a shift to sustainable and nourishing food system. Thank you, Jordan. Back to you.
Great. Thank you, Esther. I'm so appreciative that you are able to bring all of this work that AFA has already done in thinking about what needs to happen and bring it to this webinar. I think we've seen increasingly how the nutrition of people and of our food system also relies on the environment and on using climate resilient agriculture and incentives. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Gladys, I want to hop over to you. What is the government of Kenya doing at the national policy level to improve the nutrition of the country's food system? You mentioned the national policy you had. I hope maybe you can go into a little bit more detail about what the country is doing.
Thank you once again. Yes, I mentioned that the government is taking this matter of food security and nutrition seriously, and our president has committed to support nutrition and food security as one of the top 4 agenda of the government. And what is happening is that we are trying our best to implement the National Food Security and Nutrition Policy, which was signed in 2012. That policy highlights all that needs to be done in the various sectors, from environment, social protection, agriculture, education, health, and even private sector. And in implementing this, we require various laws and regulations. So the government has come up with the laws, and we continue to also work on that. Laws that are helping us to focus on the safety of the food. That is mainly in the Food, Drugs and Chemical Substance Act, which we keep reviewing. And as we review, we were able even to include the food fortification in this. We also have regulations that will support and promote breastfeeding. And in the Health Act, we have the establishment of breastfeeding stations at the workplaces. And we also have an act that focuses on the use of breast milk substitutes, which was signed in 2012. That act focuses on reduction of the use of substitutes that would make mothers not to breastfeed. So we are continuing to implement that. And then we have to regulate the capacity, the workers, that is the nutritionists and the dietitians. So there's an act that regulates the practice and the training, because the training is necessary for them to be able to change the systems that we are talking about. And so we keep reviewing also the training materials that are used in the various universities, and building the capacity of universities to be able to implement what we are doing. Then we have established offices that focus on nutrition and food security in the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Health. And Ministry of Health has been the lead. And as they lead, they have been able to come up with various guidelines that are supporting the healthy diets, fortification, breastfeeding. And there's also guidance, a capacity development a framework to show how whatever is required by the various actors is whatever it is that needs to be put in place, including ensuring that we have commodities that will save the lives of children who are malnourished. Through our Kenya Medical Supplies Agency, we have a system where we are able to distribute these dietary supplements to all the health facilities in the country, so that those children who are sick are able to get the life-saving supplements. The other thing is that as we do that, we are working with the private sector to ensure that they are able to come up with these supplements that are of high quality. And we work with our body that is responsible for standards, and we are able to work on standards that are used across the region, so that we're also promoting trade across the region to Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and other countries that are near us. So we've been able to implement many of the guidelines that we came up with, and through the support of various partners, we are able to reach out to those who require the services, and also to engage the farmers and other private sector actors in coming up with ways of linking, so that we do not have a system whereby each entity is doing their own thing without knowing what the other is doing. And so through the Scaling Up Nutrition, we have what we call Sun Business Network. And the focus is on bringing these people together, the farmers, those who are the retailers, those who are transporters, so that they all ensure that they put in place measures that are going to help us have safe and nutritious foods. So if we have to nourish, then we must make sure that this food is safe, it is wholesome, and it's not contaminated. So that is what we've been able to do, and we continue to do as a country. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Gladys. It's very clear that Kenya has put in a lot of effort on the policy environment around food systems. Amir, I want to come to you next. We've heard all of these things that Kenya is doing and that a policy agenda for better food systems. We've also heard how COVID-19 has disrupted all of our systems, including the food system. So what needs to happen in the next few years to rebuild better food systems for nutrition? And maybe you can talk a little bit about upcoming opportunities for engagement in this.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, clearly food systems are an increasingly recognized as an essential determinant for achieving the goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, because the food systems have the ability to impact on people's dietary patterns and consequently on the nutritional outcomes. And if we're going to achieve a world without hunger and malnutrition, a healthy world, a productive world, an economically viable world, a sustainable world, all of that by 2030, we're going to have to improve access to healthy diets, which means we're going to need food systems that support that. Now, clearly, strong food systems can protect and expand access to healthy diets. So that's all the improving side. But if you have a broken food system that fuels hunger, malnutrition, impairs livelihoods, that contributes to not only economic hardships, but also to increased violence and instability, and basically can only then be fixed with external assistance, which is not sustainable. You just mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, clearly unprecedented, and that's brought even more the fragility of food systems to light. And it's not just the food, it's along the whole chain of the food system, from agriculture, the supply side, the waste or the losses that we've heard, all the way down to food processing, to consumers, and how what people purchase, how they purchase it. And what we have today is far too many people having nutritious and affordable foods out of their reach. And so more than ever, we have to focus our collective energy on promoting food systems that are sustainable and resilient to shocks. So in addition to saving lives and meeting needs through humanitarian response, such as what WFP does a lot of, we need to plan for longer term solutions that would support recovery, strengthen preparedness, build resilience, and promote sustainable socio-economic development. And that means we need approaches to reshaping food systems, and that need to focus on the need to nourish populations rather than just address their immediate hunger, enable food systems that make healthy diets available, accessible, affordable, desirable, and above all, environmentally sustainable, and all that in a stable manner. Now, it is a huge task, but what we do have coming up next year is a food systems summit, and that offers an incredible opportunity to promote and the strengthening of food systems for healthier and more sustainable diets across all sectors. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in 2021 will convene a food system summit. And this will be part of the decade of action, the decade that will bring us to 2030 to try and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by then. And the Food System Summit will bring together all the different actors to try and really trigger tangible positive changes to the world's food systems. It will hopefully generate significant action and measurable progress towards all the SDGs, food and nutrition in particular, and for impact so many of the Sustainable Development Goals. The summit also provides an opportunity to leverage important work undertaken by many. We've we already heard about the Sun network, but also the Committee on World Food Security and all the various partners that we have here in Rome that have been working on the voluntary guidelines for food systems and nutrition, and that will bring so many of these, especially for countries working in fragile settings, bring all of this to the fore. WFP is very actively involved in the preparations for the summit, fully committed to making it a success. Our executive director, David Beasley, is a member of the summit's advisory committee. WFP is a member of the UN task force. We've seconded staff members to the summit secretariat. We've provided funding, and we are the lead UN anchor agency on what is known as Action Track 5, which is building resilience to vulnerability, shock, and stresses, which is one of WFP's mainstays. And in addition, we're working as an administrative agency for the summit. So we are deeply, deeply embedded and committed to its success. But more specifically on nutrition, in close collaboration with GAIN and FAO, we're supporting the efforts on Action Track 1, which focuses on nutrition. And this action track aims to deliver zero hunger and improve levels of nutrition, enabling all the people of the planet to be well nourished and healthy. And it will develop game-changing solutions for accelerating hunger reduction, making nutritious food more available and affordable, and making food systems safer. So clearly the items under Action Track 1, but also we believe under Action Track 5, are fundamental to helping food systems evolve and develop and shape themselves to get us to a better world where nutrition isn't a luxury, it is something that basically drives economic progress across the world. Over. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Amir. That phrase you just used, where nutrition is the driver, I think that's really inspiring, and that is one of our hopes for this process over the next year. Thank you. Gladys, back to you. We just heard about this UN Food System Summit taking place next year. How is the government of Kenya preparing for this on making food systems more sustainable, equitable, and nutritious?
What Kenya is doing is that we would like to share what we've been able to do, and therefore we'd like to see how we can bring the various actors and those who have implemented the policy as it is together, so that we're able to tell our story and share with other countries. And in that process, then we'll be able to have this as a platform for us also to learn from other countries. And therefore, it will be good that we have several representatives who will be able to get this information that will help us to move forward. To us, this is an advocacy forum that will be very useful to build what we've been able to do and help us to do better. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Gladys. I love that you pointed out, this is a time for advocacy, as well as learning from what other countries and other stakeholders have done. Thank you for sharing that. Esther, what do the farmers that you work with want to see from this summit next year?
Yes, we would like our leaders to be very actively engaged in the dialogues that will be happening during the summit at the global level, also at the national level, because what we know is that the Food System Summit would like to conduct member states dialogue. So we are part of the Action Track 1. We have a colleague who is representing us in Action Track 1. We are also in Action Track 3, and our network, the network of CSOs where we are involved with World Rural Forum, is part of Action Track 4. So we see the Food System Summit as really the space for advocating the food systems that we want. So we would like to exert influence on this process. So we are preparing ourselves for that. We would like to see the summit to agree on what sustainable food system look like, the principles, the qualities, the indicators, criteria. But we hope, and we want, that's why we are trying to influence. We want the agreement to be the kind of food system that we want, like what I said earlier, a food system that is productive, prosperous, resilient, regenerative, healthy and nutritious, but empowering also to the most vulnerable, especially women, men, and young farmers. So it's a food system that nourishes both the planet and its people. And after the summit, hopefully, that kind of food system is agreed. All action, partnerships among farmers organizations, partnerships among women farmers, young farmers, as well as multi-stakeholder partnership between government, farmers, civil society, public, private sector, agribusiness. They are being done left and right and after the summit, because then we have agreed on the commitments and actions taken, so that by 2030, at the end of the SDG, we can say that we have achieved the SDGs, especially SDG 1 and 2. We are excited because this is also the decade of family farming, 2019 to 2028. And as you said, farmers are the backbone of the food systems. And in this decade of family farming, we hope that we could use the Food System Summit and its results as a way of also mobilizing ourselves and unleashing the potentials of the millions of family farmers to contribute for a sustainable food system, healthy, nutritious, and empowering food system. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Esther. I love the emphasis you put on the action part. You know, we need to come to agreement on the way forward, and then we need to put it into action. Thank you very much, Esther. Amir, back to you. We've talked a lot about partnerships in this webinar. So how can international partners like the United States, where I'm sitting, collaborate with multilateral groups like the UN and others in this summit, and more generally to promote nutrition within food systems?
Okay, thank you, Jordan. And I'd like to just first pick up on where Ma Estrella, and thank you, Ma. I thought that was very a really, really important call to action there. But I'd like to just pick up where she left off, and that was about, you know, this is the decade of family farming, you know, and the role of family farmers within food systems, hugely important. But here's probably a little known fact. You know, WFP will be assisting close to, you know, on any given year, up to 100 million people, more so this year, in this year of the COVID crisis. But many, far too many of that 100 million are actually small holder farmers themselves. You know, many of our beneficiaries, people who end up needing food assistance, are actually, or would be if they had the inputs that they needed, or the peace and security that they need, would be farming and producing, not only for their families, for their own needs, but to have a little bit access to market. So clearly there's a food system that's not working. So we need to, you know, this is an issue that we really need to get to grips with. Now, because that's not working, you have huge numbers of people in dire need of food assistance. Now, a lot of it is conflict driven, and we know that, but a lot of it is actually driven because they're unable to produce what they need. And in the immediate term, you know, you ask what the US can do. I mean, the US does a significant amount in this immediate term. The relief assistance that the United States provide to those people who can't produce for themselves through no fault of their own. The United States, on any year, normally gives WFP close to 50% of its budget. So there's a huge amount, and this year that's amounting to nearly $4 billion. So there's a huge amount that the United States does. But it's having to do that because, in a sense, the failure of many systems. So it is important that we all work together, multilateral groups such as the United Nations, civil society, but also, government donors like the United States, that we work together, that we implement all these ways that we can do. I mean, we've got things going on within the nutrition movement, like scaling up nutrition, the sun. We've had a merger of activities within the UN system to put our thought pieces on UN together, which we call UN Nutrition. We all have fora in which we can discuss this, but we now need that advocacy to turn into action. So what can be done? Well, I think we have countries, over 60 countries have established part of the sun, and they've got networks that are highly functional. We have UN agencies, 16 different UN agencies are working in nutrition work plans in those 60 countries. So we are doing a lot towards this. But I think, as you just heard from Estrelle, that we need to take these country dialogues that are going to go on as key important entry points for local governments. But what we need to see are the governments such as the United States and other donors support those country dialogues and support the actions that will come out of those dialogues, because that's how we're going to get a longer term sustainable solution, which we hope one day will mean that the United States does not have to meet billions of dollars of emergency food need. I mean, the United States generosity is, it's unbound, but it's not sustainable. It's not fair that billions and billions of dollars are put year after year after year into always meeting the same need. And so we're hoping that the outcome from the Food System Summit can give sort of ways in which food systems can heal themselves and then build on it. And just in closing, as I've obviously shared this panel with two very, very engaged, influential and powerful women in the area of food system. I've often said one of the biggest problems with food systems is man-made conflict. But I've always been very encouraged, because I've always said, for every man-made problem, there's a woman-led solution. So I think that we've heard it in this panel. The two greatest voices of what needs to be done have actually come from my co-panelists, the two women, and it's been a pleasure to share the panel with them.
Great, thank you so much, Amir. Really helpful and concise laid out of what needs to happen next, and a really great vision of healing food systems, making them sustainable so that emergency food assistance is no longer needed. Thank you for that. So we're going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. Gladys, we have one question for you. The Sun Movement strategy, the next phase of that strategy is on its way. So what should this next phase of the movement, of the Sun Movement, do in helping transform food systems for nutrition?
Yes, we are going to the third phase of the Sun Movement. The strategy is at the level of the top leadership. And the discussion is that we would like to see countries leading and countries going down to the lowest level, making sure they're reaching all the people in the country. It shouldn't be something we are discussing just at national level, but it should go to subnational, and that we should have resources to cater for all the needs across sectors. And also the leadership should be more engaged, so that scaling up nutrition is at the office of the president or a prime minister, at a level where decision making is being done. The other thing is, I think I've mentioned resources, not just from the government, but also partners to continue supporting, and also for us to continue getting countries exchanging ideas and sharing, so that they're able to support one another, because we cannot work in silos. So that is what is coming up, and we are hoping that once it's agreed upon, we'll be able to implement at country level, and it should be country-led. Thank you.
Thank you, Gladys. I really appreciate what you were mentioning of learning from each other. I think we learned even more this year that global problems require global solutions. I think mainly that's been said in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think that is also true of our food system. No country can operate in the food system alone. So thank you for that, Gladys. Amir, I'm going to put this question to you. It is essentially, sometimes those who benefit from current food systems are politically powerful and can block or put through different reforms to this transformation of food systems. So what has worked in your experience to convince a variety of stakeholders like governments, the private sector, civil society to number one, that there's a need for change, and number two, to work together to make that change?
I think, you know what they say, money speaks or money talks. Clearly, you need, governments, private sector, even civil society need to recognize that improving systems is not just a cost, it's an investment, and the return on that investment is huge. I mean, what is a cost is hunger. There is a huge cost to hunger, and just feeding the hunger without solving the food system issue, that then is a cost and not an investment. So we clearly need to be able to demonstrate the return on investment, and that is why, as Gladys had mentioned earlier, why it's really important that some of the advocacy for this and the follow-up on action within governments remains at a very senior level, a prime minister's office, or it's a cabinet level. We often say, when you go to there's no ministry of hunger, or and rarely a ministry of nutrition. It's the different activities are because it is such a multi-sectoral issue. There, bits of it are need action in many different line ministries, but you need an authority that actually says these actions are not a cost, they're an investment, and therefore they need to be budgeted for in national plans. And then you also need to make available to private sector the incentives, because this long term is going to be about private sector. And I think, we now recognize, I mean, it probably took the UN and multilateral system a little while to recognize that, profit and, is not necessarily a bad thing. These you're not going to get multinational private sector companies. I mean, we're very happy when they do it for their corporate social responsibility. We want them to be engaged. We want them to be, look for sustainable, environmentally friendly solutions, etc. But recognize that long term, for the sustainability of those countries, they need to, this needs to be an investment with a return. And I think that's what we need to be able to demonstrate. And where it has worked, it's worked very, very well. So I think all people involved in this, whether from donor side, the government, the host government side, the private sector corporations, all each need to play their part and recognize that we all have a role, but that making it a sustainable solution, I think, is the only way.
Great. Thank you so much, Amir. That's really helpful, I think, in working together. Esther, I'm going to put this question to you, and this will be our last question. Someone mentions, there's a big push globally around meat substitutes, and I think this relates to both nutrition, but also the environmental and sustainable aspects of food systems, of reducing livestock around that as well. But it's mentioned, for regenerative farmers, integration of livestock and crops for soil health, and I would add for household assets is really important as well. So what are your thoughts, or what have you seen with your farmers on balancing livestock with sustainability and nutrition?
Most of our member farmers organizations are promoting integrated farming. So that means integrating crops, livestock, trees, for example, and fruits, no? Because our diets has to be diverse, okay? And also because each system feeds on the other, as such that there is like recycling, there is use of one thing to another. Like for example, the manure of chicken is used as an organic fertilizer for your crops, for your plots. So, and the trees, the dried leaves of trees are used for mulching. So it's very helpful also when you do organic or natural farming. So we really promote integrated, diversified, climate resilient family farming systems. What I know of meat substitutes are basically those processed in laboratories, if that's what you mean. So we think that for family farming, especially in developing countries where the farmers are basically family farmers, really small scale, that kind of meat substitute which is processed in the field it will not be readily affordable and teachable to the farmers. But meat substitutes like plant-based, like mung beans and lentils and organic soya and others, that are healthy substitutes for meat. And actually, what we know of livestock, so they say that the statistics say that livestock agriculture emits the one of the largest greenhouse gas emissions, but it's basically the big livestock, industrial livestock. But the small scale livestock, a family farmer owning 6 cows, for example, and you use the manure, and I don't think it contributes a lot to the greenhouse gas emissions. Science will tell. I'm not a scientist, but the practice tells that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther, for that perspective. So that wraps up the panel portion of this webinar. And to close our event, we're delighted to welcome Ambassador Kip Tom. He's the United States Permanent Representative to the United Nations Agencies for Food and Agriculture in Rome. Ambassador Tom is an agribusiness leader who transformed a 7th-generation farm into one of the largest commodity businesses in the Midwestern United States, while also launching international operations and deploying new technologies. So Ambassador, welcome, and we look forward to hearing your remarks.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to start out by saying thank you to you, Jordan, and Bread for the World, an organization I've known for some time. And as well as thank you to Representative McGovern, Deputy ED of the World Food Program, Amir Abdulla, and all the insightful panelists for their thought-provoking discussions this afternoon here in Rome and this morning back in the United States. This is exactly what we need more of. And as we work to lay the solid groundwork for food systems of the future, we really need to have these collaborative discussions. Well, as you know, as a lifelong family farmer and now ambassador to the United States to the UN food agencies here in Rome, I can tell you today from my global experiences in food systems that our complex $8 trillion global food supply chain is facing unprecedented challenges. And we won't be able to meet them unless we can accelerate the adoption of innovation, bold action, and most of all, collaboration across sectors, organizations, and nations, and the people on this call. The upcoming UN Food System Summits taking place in 2021 will be a critical opportunity for just that discussion. And as Amir said, this event intends to raise global awareness and land global commitments to transforming food systems, resolving hunger and malnutrition, while reducing diet-related diseases and improving the health of our planet. Yet we know to be successful, the summit's going to have to focus on core goals like productivity growth, improved nutrition, well-functioning markets, working within our planetary boundaries, and open trade. So doing this will yield our shared objectives, providing a predictable, affordable supply of diverse, nutritious foods, safeguarding livelihoods, and contributing to sustainable development. I want to thank Congressman McGovern for his commitment to ending hunger and the support of the United States Department of State, USAID, USDA, and other U.S. agencies in fighting global food security issues. And I can assure you all that those in the private sector and academia are also working hard to make sure that research, science, and the adoption and the use of latest innovations and technology in agriculture are the foundational pillars for any path forward. It's certainly agreed by everyone in the U.S. that tools for improving food systems must be considered, all tools. And we must make sure we expand options and opportunities instead of limiting them for farmers, whether large or small. So just as we discuss frequently the topics of biodiversity, we need to offer diversity in food systems that are inclusive of all approaches. A singular approach based on an ideological food system driven by public policy could yield a catastrophic global famine, a potential reality that most of the world's vulnerable should not have to experience. We also strongly believe that the summit should serve as a forum for stakeholders to exchange knowledge and practical solutions. So as we push for more diverse voices at the table from farmers and others in the supply chain, collaborating with key players in the private sector, focusing on the innovation and resources to accelerate food systems evolution and drive bold action. And that's where you all come in. Everyone here today and every country around the world has the opportunity to help shape the dialogue at the Food Systems Summit and beyond. So for the United States, the summit is an important opportunity to highlight the remarkable success of our diverse and constantly evolving agriculture system and all the incredible tools and expertise that the United States has to offer the world in our fight against hunger and the race to build a sustainable food system of the future. The U.S. is a global leader in food and ag systems in protecting our biodiversity, lowering our carbon footprint, improving our soil health, lowering our usage of inputs and other resources while leveraging our use of data science to increase productivity in order to produce a predictable, resilient supply of food that is affordable and nutritional, while even during the pandemic that we just experienced while working within our planetary boundaries. We also believe that this same agriculture expertise, together with the best and boldest ideas from around the globe, we can meet our sustainability goals. First, to define sustainability, we define it upon 3 pillars: social, environmental, and economic. So build on those 3 pillars, we would allow current systems to continue to evolve to support capacity building while supporting resilient food and agricultural systems. And finally, promoting more efficient food production, or as we say, doing more with less. In the meanwhile, reducing our carbon footprint as we work within our planetary boundaries. And in tandem, we will also continue to increase biodiversity and environmental stewardship of the natural resources of our planet Earth. I can share with you that as a family farmer, and I share this with family farmers around the world, that if the belief is in our heart, as we transition our family farms from one generation to the next, we want to return it better than it was in our generation. So in closing, it is our moral obligation to assure we bring inclusive approaches to food systems. And as I said earlier, when we speak about biodiversity, we need to speak of diversity in food systems. They need to be based on science, not on an ideological view that it's an indulgence of the rich, indefensibly scientifically, and indefensibly morally. Ultimately, we need to improve lives, offer better livelihoods, and more opportunity for people across the globe. I want to thank you all for this opportunity this afternoon to share my thoughts with you, and I've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Really appreciate you joining us and extending that vision. It's very inspiring. In closing, I want to first thank our panelists, Esther, Gladys, and Amir, for a really interesting and insightful panel. I am energized and excited for this next year for food systems, despite all of the challenges that we're facing. I also want to thank Congressman McGovern and Ambassador Tom for joining us and giving those remarks. It's been really exciting to see from all levels of government and civil society and multilateral today, the partnership for nutritious food systems. So today we heard about a vision to nourish people and the planet through our food system. And with that, we're going to need partnership across all sectors. We're going to need action across all collaborators. We also heard that nutrition is the business of food system actors, and that's something that we can all take forward into next year, knowing that just government or just civil society or just private sector won't do the job alone. We have to work together and find ways to incentivize that collaboration. We also heard we want to change basically what our food system produces. Right now, we see that the results of our food system as it currently is more hunger and malnutrition and waste and poverty. And what we want our food system to produce is healthy diets, is better incomes, and is a sustainable environment for our climate. We've heard about some opportunities coming up in the next year or two. The first that was mentioned was Feed the Future, which is the U.S. government global food security flagship initiative, as in one opportunity of transforming food systems. We also heard about GAFSP, the Global Agriculture and Food Security Program, with its replenishment and more proposals coming out. And then finally, we heard about the UN Food Systems Summit. The dialogues are taking place even now, and then the summit will continue next year. But as we heard, after the summit, that's when the real action begins. So we hope that we have learned from this webinar some lessons to take forward and to work with collaborators in our own sectors and in other sectors. So thank you everyone for joining us. We were really excited to have you here. And please continue the conversation on Twitter or by email with us. Otherwise, happy holidays and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.